It's great to be able to give you an update on DARWIN EU. We've done it every year. This is the third year of the DARWIN EU initiative. It's actually the first operational year. So the first 2 years were establishment year. We're now in operational mode. And I'm here together with my colleagues to just inform you about how things are going in this third year and what's planned. Well, it's important to mention that we do not speak here on behalf of the European Medicines Agency. We are the DARWIN EU Coordination Center that has a contract with EMA to implement and operate the Coordination Center for EMA. Now, just a bit of background for me to give to you. The DARWIN EU initiative is coming from a broader vision of the European Medicines Agency to unlock the value of real-world evidence at scale for the full spectrum of regulatory use cases. And this is a strategy towards 2025. And DARWIN is one of the important components of that, as decided also by the Big Data Task Force, where DARWIN is the network to run studies for the EMA and for its committees. It's good to mention that there's been a very nice communication about the work that we are doing in the real-world evidence space, and I can everybody really recommend to have a look at this link above. There is a report. Every year, EMA publishes a report from February to February, which is nicely aligned actually with the DARWIN EU phases. And they share information about how real-world evidence is generated for the agency and for its committees. And it's very good to see, of course, that DARWIN has an important role in generating real-world evidence for the regulator. And this is a quite lengthy report, and I can really recommend you to have a look into that if you are interested. Also, of course, the DARWIN EU website has been there for a while. But we try to keep it also up to date, and especially around the studies that we are executing. They are all reported in that studies tab with links to the registry, and Katja will share more about that later in her presentation. But there's also a lot of information about the methods that we use, the data network, and how we grow the data network if you need more information after this call. Now, the goal of DARWIN EU is to establish and maintain a framework, and it's focused on better decision-making throughout the life cycle of the medicinal products. And of course, it's very important that it's timely, valid, and reliable evidence from real-world healthcare databases. And of course, the OMOP common data model is the core of all of this, otherwise I would not be speaking here. And we've been setting up a network of data sources. I'll talk a bit about that, and Maxime will talk about it. But we're also executing all the steps from feasibility request up to sending back the final report to the European Medicines Agency for the decision making. And that's nicely shown in this figure here. Coordination Center, Erasmus MC contractor, with subcontractors, as I'll show you in a minute, handle questions coming from the committees on the upper left side. And we assess whether this study would be feasible within the current data network and set out the whole study, create the protocols, go to the governance approvals, all the steps that you very well are aware of within the OHDSI community. What's also interesting in this plot is the right side with the data permit authorities. That's a development within the European health data space, that they are setting up data permit authorities on the national level or regional. Discussions ongoing. And that means that we will contact that data permit authority to run the study, and they will distribute it to the data sources in their network. And what's quite nice is that this is now also happening in one of the data partners that we have onboarded, so the OMOP. So the Finnish data has one central point that we contact for studies, and they have a network of data sources where we pick which data sources to run. So it's already getting closer to the European health data space format, and we do expect that to be the case in more countries pretty soon. Type of analysis, just as a reminder for those who have maybe not seen, or you have not seen the earlier presentation, there are 3 types of studies that we are asked to run. Off-the-shelf studies, you should see those as quick studies like incidence prevalence, drug utilization, mainly characterization questions. Complex studies are more advanced. You could think about the cohort method, the self-control case series designs, where we use OHDSI tools, and those can both be repeated over time. So that could be do a half-yearly update on the incidence of prevalence, or maybe run this study on another part of the network. And so we are establishing, aligning a bit on how to implement those routine repeated, because this is the time to start repeating studies that we've done before, which of course wasn't possible in the first years in the establishment phase. There's also a fourth category called very complex. This is still to be discussed what it could be, but you can imagine a more methodological work. There's also a bigger budget for that, where we could focus, for example, on pregnancy and how to deal with pregnancy data or linkage and that kind of topics. Now, the Darwin EU Coordination Center is hosted at the Erasmus Medical Center at my department. I have two deputy directors, Dani and Katja, who are both in the call, I hope. But we do this together with contractors you see on the right side, familiar to most of you. I think here, the Oxford team helping out with the development pillar and co-development together with the Erasmus team, Sign-ups for management, Acuvia has been involved in many steps, but is currently also part of executing studies with their own teams in Darwin. The Hive, who is involved in the database onboarding and doing great work there, and Odysseus is involved with Atlas instances, but also we're exploring the use of the execution engine with the Racking. So we have three sections to come. Maxime is going to give you an update on the network operations, so the data sources that we have onboarded recently, and talk a little bit about the process, how we do that. Then Dani will talk a bit about development pillar, focusing on some analytics. And then Katja will give a nice overview on the studies that we have been executing and are currently executing. That's, of course, the main goal of everything that we do, is to make sure that Katja is happy and that we can run many studies together within the Darwin EU initiative. I think I hand over to you, Maxime. I'm happy to move the slides if you want to. Just say next slide.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I would like to give an overview of the current state of the Darwin EU network and give you an insight in the processes of selecting data partners. So currently, we have a network of 20 data partners. This is an overview of what countries are covered. We see 2 data sets from the UK, Security Gold, Chico Biobank. I won't go through them all, but it's a nice mix of primary care data sources, hospital data sources, registries, a cancer registry and a population registry, and a few claims data sets. We aim to grow the network by 10 data partners each year. We're now busy working on an additional set of 10 data partners. Next slide shows that we're expanding also to Norway, Italy, and Greece, as well as some additional data partners already covered countries. So we aim to fill up this map as much as possible, but still in high quality, valuable data sources, of course. Next slide shows the process of how we select data partners. So after the second year, we opened or after the first year, actually, we opened an open call, which is continuously open for submissions for potential data partners to submit their interest. We have over 100 submissions so far, and we only have 40, now actually just 20 spots remaining to fill. So you can imagine a lot of work goes into prioritization of these data sources. And there we focus first on already converted data sources, to convert to the OMOP CDM. And we do this together with EMA. What we look here is the population size and representatives of the database for the catchment area, uniqueness of the data, so data types that we might not have already, of course, the data quality, track record of the group, as the data partner needs to execute the studies that we share with them, and of course, as I said already, regions that we might not have already covered. For some sources that might not have been mapped already to OMOP, we also provide some support to map to OMOP. And as the last step, that all the selected data sources will go through an onboarding process that has been approved by EMA, and it includes several quality control steps. On the next page, just find some information. I won't read it all, but I have the link here. So if you're interested and want to submit an expression of interest in this open call, this page explains how to do so. The first step, and it's on the next page, is actually to add an entry to the catalog of real data sources, which has recently, I think it's now live for a bit more than a year, set up by HMA and EMA, providing a catalog of both real-world data sources, but also of studies, institutions, and also data networks, mainly within Europe. Then on the next slide, just one example of the data quality assessment that we do. So we have a use of the data quality dashboard, which has been valuable in this onboarding process. But we've also developed further a report that we also use in Eden already, but now rebranded to CDM onboarding for Darwin EU, that reports on the database characteristics that we evaluate upon onboarding. And next slide, just to show also the people behind the network. During the European OHDSI Symposium this year, we had a face-to-face meeting with all the current data partners in the room. That was really nice to see each other, and also discuss challenges, opportunities. Yeah, I see some faces behind just the data. If you want to know more on the network, and actually don't want to see faces but numbers, we have this page describing the data network in detail with some numbers and the types of data. And we'll update this hopefully soon with the data partners that we're onboarding at the moment. And then we'll have a total of 30 data partners. One last thing to note here, so there's a total of 143 million patients. I think we even increased to 158 already. We have 20 data partners, but actually that consists of 25 data sources. As Peter mentioned already, 2 data partners who have multiple sources, like OMOP, which consists of 3 hospital databases and a registry. That's what I wanted to share on the Darwin network.
Thank you. Let's move to you, Danny.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, hopefully I don't look much older than in that picture that you showed earlier. Okay, these are the 4 points that I'm going to cover relatively quickly. I will not talk a lot about study implementation execution because that's going to be covered more by Katja. But basically, the development pillar has 4 main tasks. One is developing standardized analytics and pipelines or maintaining the existing ones. Second is indeed being involved in the execution and the implementation of the studies that we run. Third is phenotyping, which is a whole field in its own, as you know very well. And then fourth, very importantly, training. Training, as you will see, for our data partners, for regulators, and externally as well. Next slide, please. So talking about data standardization and data analytics, it feels a bit dumb to tell this audience about this, but basically the standardization of data in Europe, of course, has meant that we can create or use pipelines for federated standardized analytics. We do have a very key element in Darwin, which is a catalog of standard data analysis co-created with the European Medicines Agency, where they have told us explicitly what they want from each type of study. So we can then develop specific pipelines to produce exactly the output that they want and to create exactly the kind of figures and tables even that they need for each specific study type. So that is the effort in terms of data analytics. Next slide, please. Well, there's a large team of developers in Darwin EU. Don't be surprised that there's only 4 people in that picture and only one of me. Those are the people who are going to be teaching the off-the-shelf characterization studies using Darwin EU tools and the OMOP CDM at the upcoming OHDSI Global Symposium. But just to mention that The idea with this building of tools is that for some of the study types where we didn't have tools, we had to develop specific packages to do things like, incidence or prevalence or calculation of drug utilization studies and the likes. Next slide, please. And you have here the four main, there was an animation there I didn't expect. The four main study types that we have as off-the-shelf, or the kind of more simple studies that we have developed packages for include patient-level characterization or cohort characterization, patient-level drug utilization analysis, population-level drug utilization, and population-level descriptive epi, which is basically incidence and prevalence. Now you can go to the next, Peter. This probably has an animation as well. Maybe you can click twice. There is this is just the first package that we developed called incidence prevalence, and I just wanted to show you that on top of the usual kind of unit tests and software development principles, we aim to also test against some sort of clinical benchmark. And in this particular case, we tested against a paper that we had previously written with the OHDSI community, looking at background rates of adverse events of special interest. On the left, getting very similar findings to what we had previously published, in this case in a beautiful paper in the BMJ. And then on the right, you see the official figures of COVID-19 infections according to national agencies in the UK and Spain. That will be in blue, compared to the results from the package using primary care data from those two places in red, which shows a very big mismatch at the beginning when we didn't have community testing, but very close figures from September, October 2020 when we did have community testing. Next slide. We also aim to test software performance, and this is just a test of incidence prevalence in different settings and different databases, as you can see within the network. Next slide. And then we also aim to disseminate as much as possible a lot of information on how the packages work, and even trying to publish papers on journals like, in this case, pharmacoepidemiology and drug safety, of tutorials on how to use them. Next slide. Giving you a very good quick summary of what we've done in the last year. All the necessary packages we believe are now developed and in use. They have to be, of course, maintained, improved, and so on. And there is a lot of work now on improving these packages, consolidating the reporting and harmonizing reporting from them, and then disseminating and documenting them and providing training on how to use them. Next slide. Phenotyping, another big bunch of activity. We have spent quite a lot of time co-creating a process for phenotyping based on the OMOP CDM with the European Medicines Agency. We included colleagues who are very used to the use of real-world data, like the people in the real-world evidence task force, but also people from the pharmacovigilance teams who are more experience in looking at spontaneous reports rather than real-world data. It's been a very fruitful collaboration. We do have now an approved EMA-endorsed standard operating procedure on how we do phenotyping, which I'm sure will be revised in the future, because this is a never-ending story. And we have a manuscript describing the process that's currently in preprint and will be published hopefully very soon. Next slide. And then finally, last but not least, training. We are doing a lot of face-to-face and online training to the EMA, to the EU regulatory network, so that would be all the national authorities across Europe. We've so far done a lot of work on characterization studies, drug utilization. We've done phenotyping workshops and training with and for the EMA, and we're now increasingly doing also external training to colleagues who might want to use the things that have been developed for Darwin EU, including in face-to-face summer schools and stuff like that, and then also, of course, OHDSI meetings, ISPOR, ISP, and any relevant society. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Katia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny. Peter, I'm around.
Very good.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. So it's my pleasure to give you some updates on the study. So Peter, okay to go to the next slide. So we are indeed in the first operation and first year of operation, phase 3, and you see the number of studies planned for year 3 in the table. So with regard to the routine repeated analysis, 6 to 12 studies are planned. Off the shelf, 25 to 30. Complex studies, 12 to 18. Peter, can you go to the next slide? And this is the current status. So we are now year 3. We are currently working or have finished 15 off-the-shelf studies, 7 complex studies, and we received a request and are going to do 2 routine repeated studies. And as you will notice, we received quite some feasibility requests as well. So 51 requests as of end of September of this year. Next slide, Peter. This is a nice slide which we received from the EMA with regard to DARWIN EU, and that's on the importance of real-world evidence with regard to decision-making for the EMA. And they differentiate between 3 types of studies. So they say we can use real-world evidence to understand the clinical context, and these would be typically disease epidemiology studies, or studies on management of diseases, for instance, or drug utilization studies. But for them, having real-world evidence is also important with regard to support of planning of future studies, and that's focusing on feasibility, but also, for instance, repeating studies and checking the validity of completed studies. And then generating real-world evidence is also, of course, very important as part of their safety monitoring, but also looking into comparative effectiveness and also to monitor the impact of regulatory actions. And so they gave these 3 types of situations where real-world evidence is so important. They gave it a specific color, and if you remember that color and move to the next slide, Peter, you will see this is an example of some of the studies that we have done, all with the focus they originated from. So you see that we did quite some studies on understanding clinical contexts, and these were majority drug utilization studies. We also already focused on safety studies, where we looked into safety of in the context of COVID-19, and then also doing studies in preparation of future studies or replicating studies that have been published in the past. So this is an overview of some of the studies that have been done. Next slide, Peter. And other studies, so different phases and different contexts where the importance of real-world evidence comes from for regulators. If you want to have information on the studies that we are currently doing and that we have been doing, you can find them on the website of DARWIN EU, but also if you consult the catalog of real-world studies from EMA, you will see, and then you search on Darwin studies, you will see the category, the whole list of the studies going from protocol to study report that can be consulted. Peter, if you go to the next slide. So this is what I took yesterday about the catalog of real-world studies from EMA, and you see here some examples of the studies that we are currently doing, where we look into use of azathioprine, where we look into characterization of interstitial lung disease, drug utilization studies on GLP-1 receptor agonists, but many more. So please go to the website, look for Darwin studies, and you will see the whole list. Next, Peter. And this is also, as I said, what you can consult on the website of DARWIN EU. These are not all the studies, but I gave some, an overview of ongoing studies and studies that have been completed. And I think this is my last, and of course, perhaps I also want to say that doing these studies, of course, we cannot do it alone. It's done by a whole team, colleagues, EMA colleagues, colleagues of the DARWIN EU Coordination Center, and then, of course, all the data partners. And I think that was my last slide, Peter.
Thank you very much. I think this was the last slide in total, Greg, so I think we can take some questions. I've not been able to follow the chat, so Not sure if there were questions there.
Yeah, there have been some questions on the chat, but since we have time, let's just go. If people want to raise hands and ask questions, we do have about 20 minutes, a great opportunity. First of all, thank you to Peter, Maxim, Danny, and Katja for this great session. Patrick, I'll go to you first.
Thanks, Craig, and thank you, Peter, Maxim, Danny, and Katja for presenting. Katja, your slide where you go through all of the studies is really that you've already done is kind of a extremely impressive tour de force in terms of how much stuff you've been able to do in such a short time. And I know you went through it quickly because we don't have time to go through all the details. But I wonder whether you could just maybe take a moment to reflect on the studies you've done and maybe some of the things that you've learned in those studies that you thought was maybe interesting or surprising, or how you're able to support your colleagues at the EMA, because I think you've got a nice diverse portfolio of studies, but I'm sure that there's probably some in there that you are feel particularly noteworthy.
Yeah, so I think you're frozen, Patrick. So I don't know whether, or I'm frozen. I hope not. No, okay. No, I think, of course, it has been a journey, and I cannot pick up a specific study, but I think it's a process where the Darwin EU Coordination Center learned, but also the EMA learned. It's all about first understanding what the request of EMA is. What do they want to study? What is their specific need? Of course, by having the packages available and then hoping for an off-the-shelf study, it means doing only the parameterization of the packages, ensuring that this would result in would end up in fast results, and ensuring that we meet the timelines and that we can produce reliable results in a fast way. What I liked also is the creation and learning on the concept sets, creation of the cohorts, together with data scientists and data and development, understand the packages, working and learning on that parameterization of the study code, exploring study results, feeding that back to EMA. And I think it has been a process where we all learned, I think, not only at the Darwin EU Coordination Center, also data partners, but also the EMA, definitely also the EMA. I don't know, Peter, whether, and Danny, Maxim, whether you want to comment, but this, I think it has been, a fascinating time, where we improve, but where we also learn.
Absolutely. And what I really like about it is the co-creation with the regulator, so that we really together align on what the output of these packages need to be, what we are measuring. So being in the center of all of that is, of course, very exciting because it has direct impact, and we really co-create that. I also really like the journey that the data partners go through, in the sense that they learn more about execution. We know about limitations. We try to optimize those. We try to do quality control continuously. So there's a lot of lessons learned there as well. So, Danny, see your hand is up as well.
Sorry, can I jump the queue?
Go ahead.
So just to say, I think it's been a very kind of complex journey, as I think we could all predict, of course. But it's been, as Peter was saying, a very fruitful one, in that I think we have, and I feel very confident that we have broken a few barriers and created a framework for standardized analytics, which will inevitably, I think, result in faster and more reliable real-world evidence generation. And this is indirectly, clearly, the impact of OHDSI on the whole public health environment in Europe, right? So this idea that if you commit to a specific way of doing things, you can get them done quickly without sacrificing quality or even actually improving it, is something that I don't think many people thought we could manage. And I think it is happening or has happened. And I think it's going to be very hard to go back to a different place now and say, actually, we need 18 months to do a drug utilization study, because that is not acceptable anymore. So with all the pressure that that's meant on us, I feel very, very proud. And, what I wanted to say to this big community of people, that if you've seen us being less present in these calls, that's been because we've been precisely doing that. But we've been burying the OHDSI flag very high and trying to make sure that that made an impact on public health, which is what we're talking about here.
Samir, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, Maxime, Danny, and Katya for touching different parts of Darwin. So my understanding, and based on Maxime's slide, that all the databases are within Europe, which makes sense. So are there any plan for the future to use non-Europe databases, or will be all the expanding will be within Europe? Thanks.
I can answer that. So this is really up to EMA to decide. It's not the coordination center, to be clear, but I think there's value in that, if you ask me, to include some US data, maybe even to compare or benchmark against. Of course, also collaborations possible with the FDA, and we've been visiting the Sentinel Coordination Center and discussing, learning from each other. So there may be opportunities in the future to also include some US claims data, for example. At the moment, it's not foreseen in the upcoming 10, if I remember well, but there may be a situation where that would happen.
Next up, apologies if I mispronounced, but Sanko.
You're doing well. So my question is to Maxime, actually. I mean, again, it's about training. And I wonder, you mentioned that you do also external trainings. Is it only towards academia, or companies and industry can also take advantage of what you have achieved and the way that you organize the pipeline that you have created?
I don't think I mentioned trainings, but these are aimed towards our data partners, our PIs, and also towards EMA.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
I did mention training. So I guess I was.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
I think so. We are going to give training at the OHDSI Symposium, and you'll see that there's still some empty seats in there. So definitely come and join us. And there should be other opportunities like that. And I don't think those are specific to academia, right? Like anyone from any institution can join, I think.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
We still have time. I'll pick a couple from the chat just because until other people raise their hands. One from Scott that I think probably a number of people have asked, but are your standardized tools separate from the OHDSI tool stack?
Do you want me to say that, Peter?
Anybody?
I can do it. So I think we should align as much as possible with the OHDSI stack. So definitely for the complex studies, we are building, or actually using cohort methods and self-controlled case series. For the off-the-shelf studies, I think as Danny mentioned, there were some requirements of having certain types of output and standardized analytics in the way that EMA proposed. So there's been quite some development there in building those. Sometimes gaps because they were not in the OHDSI stack, and sometimes we combine things into one. So Danny, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. They are all open source though, so.
If I could chime in on that though, Peter, because I think this is an area where I think there's some unnecessary confusion and stuff, because I think you guys have done a good job in Darwin that you're making your tools, they are fully OHDSI CDM compliant, and you're making them fully publicly available. So I think it's actually a misnomer to talk about it as being a different stack. It's more that there's a broader ecosystem of tools that are all compatible. So Scott and for others, like, you should think about taking advantage of running the DARWIN EU tools on your OMOP CDM because they're fully compliant. And you should also be using the OHDSI tools. And when it makes sense that our OHDSI community can build tools, I'm hopeful, and we've seen examples where the Darwin team is going to take them and use them. And when there are areas where the Darwin team can expand the OHDSI tool ecosystem, where we all should be the beneficiaries and take advantage of using those tools. So I don't think it's helpful to think about it in terms of two different tool stacks. I actually think we are all trying to be very aligned on being one broader ecosystem working together.
Question from Ravi. Is there a mechanism for pharma life sponsor companies to access, partner, or engage to utilize Darwin EU data for studies? And also, how are the current study questions identified and prioritized?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the answer at the moment is that that's not possible. So Darwin is for the regulatory network. However, the data sources are, of course, not dedicated only to EMA. So those are accessible, or they can be used by others as well. Through Eden, we are actually, because many of the data sources that are in Darwin have been mapped with Eden, we are exploring that also with the Eden Foundation to allow external parties or other stakeholders to run studies on data sets, and that could even be with the same tools as Darwin EU has built, because these are open source. So in that sense, there's a channel to do that. There's no exclusivity whatsoever on these data sources. It's up to them to participate in any other type of research, and it could also be from a pharma company if they allow to do that. Katja, maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, perhaps I can comment on that second part of the question, like how are current studies or questions identified and prioritized. They were generated to the committee, the EMA committees or the national competent authorities. And then these questions are translated into a feasibility request. And then that feasibility request is handled at our site, where we look whether we have sufficient counts, whether we can do the study, whether we have the resources. Perhaps also good to say that for complex studies, industry is also involved in review of the protocol. I mean, they have the chance to review the protocol, and following their input, the protocol is finalized, but that's for complex studies. And of course, protocols, reports are available on the website, on the website of EMA and the website of the Darwin EU Coordination Center.
Thank you. Thank you. Had one from Claire had reached out. A great call out as a potential update to Achilles during the talk. She asked either Maxim or Danny if either of you could comment on how your feasibility approach has changed over the first 2 years.
I can try and take that one if you wish, Maxim, and you can probably comment on the more technical side. So what we learned, and again, these have been very useful learning, is that the requests come from very specific committees at the European Medicines Agencies that have very specific requirements. Like, for example, if a request is coming from the Pediatrics Committee, they will have the expectation that you're going to give them drug count or condition count stratified by very narrow age band, right? Like a 1-year-old is very different from a 3-year-old at that stage, whilst we are used to basically stratifying by 5 or 10-year bands. So that, for example, has resulted in Maxim having to recreate, stratifications and do things like that, so that we could provide that. We've also learned that they wanted. So we learned the hard way, I would say, that sometimes you think that a data set has information on medicines, but then the expectation of the regulator is that you will provide them a granularity of drug data that maybe they do not have, be it because they do not have the specific ingredient or concept level that they expect, or because they do not have other fields, and we created a specific kind of diagnostics package called drug exposure diagnostics to run that as part of the feasibility stage, and even on onboarding. Maxim does that nowadays. So I think those are two of the most important learnings. I don't know, Maxim, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, one thing that, because we don't, from the coordination center, we don't have direct access to these databases. We only can calculate upfront only so much in terms of statistics, counts, and there it has been really helpful. For instance, using the cohort diagnostics package in a later stage to do more deep dive into the subsets, stratifications of the specific study. on the granularity needed. But at the same time, we're also expanding indeed the counts we do get upon onboarding to be able to do more feasibility upfront without actually reaching out to the data partners.
Any other questions?
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing to add. So we constantly, of course, evaluate how the feasibility process is going and where we can improve regarding scalability and speed. So the example that Dani gave, okay, we need to have other age group division already pre-calculated, so we can make better decisions without contacting the data sources is a good example. But there may be other things coming up where some stratification is needed a lot, that so we can consider if the data sources agree to make that available proactively. So already calculate that, make it available before we select the data sources. The idea is to contact them as less as possible, because you can see already in the slide from Katja that there are very many feasibility questions which you do not want to send cohort definitions all the time to the database. That will overload them. Sometimes it may be necessary, so then we do have to create a cohort and ask them to run something for a study. But in principle, the first step is mainly doing the pre-calculated Achilles results and on top some new features.
Jan?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Peter, Maxime. Lovely to see you again. I'm very impressed, as always, by your work. Like as an excited spectator, I'm really impressed with what the entire community has delivered. I was just curious, so zooming out a little bit, and you touched upon the EHDS, and I see that a lot of what are the requirements in EHDS are actually already met by the DARWIN EU network. The only thing I do see is that right now the EMA and the national competent authorities are basically the data user role in your network. Is there any future where you'd be open to other potential data users or people initiating these studies or requests for studies?
I'm happy to take that. Yeah, so it's very timely. I'm actually here at the European Commission in Brussels now. There's a topic here about potential new IMI calls, but also IHI calls, but also European health data spaces, of course, been talked about quite a bit here. And it's actually true that so DARWIN EU is a pathfinder project for European health data space. So we're kind of shaping it together with many others. And there are many discussions ongoing in the EHDS on standardization, mainly up to the level of terminology systems, but not so much yet on common data models, although OMOP is mentioned a lot. So there's definitely a need for that. And I just presented here the EDEN project and the outcome of that. And EMA was here as well, presenting on DARWIN EU and the nice link between these projects. And it actually shows that there's a big opportunity to make a kind of Darwin type of initiative, but then for all other stakeholders, which is very interesting. And I think this is definitely something that's that's on the radar also, because many projects, even some projects that you are actually now leading, Jan, are building on top of the work that we have been doing in Europe in standardizing data. There's a big opportunity for us to scale up even further and continue our journey even beyond the EDEN project and Darwin. The nice thing about Darwin is that it has this sustainability built in, right? Because this is funded through the EMA and will be continue to be funded, hopefully. So there is a nice mechanism there to have the data sources create reliable evidence for the regulator for a much longer period, which I'm, of course, very happy with.